So, hi guys, welcome back into another military video today. And this is kind of, to me, it's not going to be a little mini-series, it's just going to be a couple of videos. You can kind of call it a kind of mini-series on British, well, mainly British Army, but kind of the military reasons why and the reasons for. So this first one, or just first of a couple, will be the reason why the British Army lost and retreated from Mons, the Battle of Mons, here on the 22nd of August 1914. So if you think about it, the British Army was a fantastic fighting force that could take on the world. Well, they thought they could take on the world by the turn of the century of 1800. And, they had conquered South Africa, they had conquered India, and many other places during the British Empire's lifetime. But when it came down to really things like actually thinking ahead, the British Army wasn't too good at that, because, so basically, the British Army looked upon France's defeat in May of 1871 on the Franco-Prussian War, when Prussia basically obliterated France, stole Alsace-Lorraine, and became an empire. So Germany, or an imperial Germany, German Empire, and Britain saw that as quite really quite annoyed, because France has been an ally for quite a lot. Several years with France, and will definitely be by the time the First World War comes around. What else? And a lot of the European powers, like Prussia and France and all that, were planning ahead on doing something called manoeuvres and exercises. And so basically the end of the Franco-Prussian War was the Franco-Prussian War in itself was the end, or the final war, during the kind of the Prussian or the German unification of Germany, where they started back in 1866 with the Austro-Prussian War. And so France, Germany, a lot of other European countries were doing manoeuvres and exercises. So a manoeuvre is basically a massive, drawn-out, planned battle using using blank rounds. So of course you can't actually injure somebody in the process, and it's kind of staging a battle for what might come, so you're already ready. And then an exercise, it's also on a manoeuvre, it's multiple officers giving out commands to multiple people. But then an exercise is one person giving one order to a group of people who does that one thing at one time. So that's the difference between manoeuvre and exercise. Now, the British Army, right through the 1800s, well, not right through, but basically up till about 1896, so basically the 1890s, the British Army had never done manoeuvres, or, well, they'd done exercises, a bit of exercises, but not manoeuvres. So whilst Germany and France were all kind of what you can class veterans of manoeuvres, staging battles, the British Army had really only started doing manoeuvres back in 1895. Well, basically in the 1890s, that's when they first. So they were very behind, very late in planning and kind of planning ahead basically on doing manoeuvres and big exercises out in the field. They were so behind that in the 1902 manoeuvres, the British Army was so confuddled that if it would have been a real battle, the crowd, who always flocked from different villages and different areas, towns and cities, came to watch, would have been massacred because a British cannon faced the wrong way and actually faced into the main body of the crowd. This is the 1902 manoeuvres. So the British Army, with big staged manoeuvres, were very behind. So that was another reason, basically the build-up to why the British Army failed at the Battle of Mons, because they they were very behind on planning, and if this would have happened, manoeuvres basically. Also, another thing with manoeuvres, when the British Army officially kind of started doing them, a lot of the crowds, as I said, flocked to different areas. They would get in the way of horses, get in the way of men, get in the way of guns, wagons. It's like the modern paparazzi people today, basically jumping over hedges, going everywhere, get in front of you, taking photos. It's kind of a modern, and motor cars at the time used to get in the way of staff cars and other cars on British and cavalry, because of the big influx of civilians going to watch, and also foreign representatives from Germany. Of course, Germany didn't declare war in 1902, so German people were safe to come over and watch these manoeuvres. Which, of course, if they knew the future, this wouldn't have happened, but of course it did. Another reason why the British Army retreated at Mons, because the British basically heard on the news, in the newspapers, that the might of the Imperial German Army had just massacred Belgian civilians, women, children, in Liège, and then they were moving on to France, mainly Paris. So they had to, of course, quickly do something about it. So what they came up with was the British Expeditionary Force. So just think of the police. It wasn't the B.E.F. wasn't a big massive army stopping a war. They were basically policemen stopping a little to medium quarrel. So they only sent roughly 80 to 81,000 men to Belgium, and of course they set up defences at the Mons Canal area. But if you compare that with the 600 to 700,000 German infantrymen who were bearing down on them, the British Army the British B.E.F. didn't have a chance. 80 to 81,000. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of men. But then they're facing off the German army, who had roughly 600 to 700,000 men. So really, that but basically in a nutshell, it was the leading up to the First World War in August 1914, with the British Army adopting the manoeuvres and big manoeuvres and exercises, and kind of planning ahead. This was only done first back in the 1890s, right through the early 1900s. So the British Army were very behind. Also, a lot of the generals kind of very weakly to say that they were mostly kind of accustomed to South African warfare, in the desert and on horseback and things like that. That's very loose to say. The reason. Another reason why is, of course, the British Army. British Expeditionary Force was only sent to stop a little quarrel. 81,000 men versus 700,000 Germans. Which, just to say, this cap badge is of the Royal Fusiliers, and it was actually the Royal Fusiliers, one of the main regiments, who had to basically try and halt the Germans. I believe it was correct me if I'm wrong, it was either the 1st or the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Fusiliers. Basically they were the elite by the time the First World War basically got going. And they were stationed at Jamant Bridge to basically blow it up. And there was, not blow it up, to stop the Germans as well. And there was Nimi Bridge as well, which they were stationed alongside the whole canal, trying to basically every bridge you can think of to halt the German advance. And of course, Royal Engineers had to blow up some bridges as well. Of course, they didn't, because Germany was already there, so the Germany would have stopped them doing it. Of course, German army getting the British to turn and run in retreat, because it was, you know, overwhelming. So yeah, as I was saying, another thing which is quite important is the British Expeditionary Force, being what they are, were only supplied with ammunition, and supplies, mainly ammunition, to fight 4 battles, not a whole war. So yeah, so thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one, and this has been kind of my, you can kind of class it as a first episode, kind of, it's just, you know, another military history bit of the reason why the British Army, or the British Expeditionary Force really, basically fled and retreated from the Battle of Mons, while they basically, it was a failure. So, thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one, and see us. Bye.